that grace always leads to change. Grace leads to, see, everybody with me today? Yes. See, we have a misunderstanding often in Christian culture about grace. We have a misunderstanding about what grace really means. I remember several years ago, I was talking with my daughter, Liv. I think she was about 3 years old, and I was teaching her and having a conversation with her about grace, and she was in trouble in her room. She was laying in her bed, and she did something she wasn't supposed to do, and so I was describing to her grace, and I said, Liv, grace is undeserved favor, that even when you don't deserve it, even when we've done wrong, that God still wants to bless us and his grace, and I'm trying to teach her about grace, and she was in trouble, and so I said, Liv, do you want grace right now? And she said, yes, I want grace. And so I said, okay, I love you. I forgive you. I'll see you in the morning. And I said goodnight, and I left the room, and I walked out. And when I walked out, I shut the door, and I heard Liv say, Dad, I want grace. And I was thinking, I thought I could explain this pretty clearly, and I kind of just ignored it for a second. And she said, Dad, I want grace. And I was thinking, I already gave you grace. And so I walked back in the room, and she was pointing, and apparently she had an American Girl baby doll named Grace. And the whole time that I was talking about grace, she thought that I was going to give her her baby doll, and she was extremely disappointed when she didn't have grace. And so there was definitely a misunderstanding in that moment about grace. So many people today are confused about grace, and they think that the grace of God means that we can live however we want. If God is going to just forgive me, and if his grace is available, then let me just do whatever it is that I please, and God's going to forgive me, and his grace is available. But we have to remember this. The Bible says in Romans chapter 6, verse number 1, shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? God forbid. How shall we that are dead to sin live any longer therein? Can I tell you that grace is not a license to sin? But that grace is the greatest motivator to live for Jesus. That grace is the greatest motivator to do more for Jesus, and that's exactly what we see taking place in the life of Matthew. He said, man, God has changed my life, and I want others to experience that as well.